It's now official. The Birmingham Stallions of the United Football League are a dynasty. 3 straight championship seasons and a 32-4 record since their return, the Stallions have dominated not just the USFL, but now the United Football League as well. This is the story of how Birmingham built their dynasty, a dynasty that almost didn't happen. But before we get into this, if you enjoy college football and spring league football content like this, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Also, let me know if you think the Birmingham Stallions are now considered a dynasty, and who you think will win the UFL title next season in the comment section below. Lastly, I'm raising money for a charity run I'm participating in at the end of September. If you're interested in donating, the link is in the description below, and I would greatly appreciate it. To talk about this dynasty, we need to go back to the beginning of early 2022, when the Birmingham Stallions were choosing to announce their new head coach for the revamped United States Football League. Early reports were that Birmingham was going to bring in former Auburn head coach Gene Chizik to lead their team. There were a bunch of reports circulating around that Chizik was going to be revealed in the second batch of coaching reveals, and some were confirming that it was a done deal. Chizik refuted these reports, tweeting out on January 6, 2022, addressing a rumor this morning, "I'm honored that the USFL is interested in me for a head coaching position. We have had several discussions. Although this is a consideration, nothing has been finalized. #facts. In a move that changed the trajectory of the Stallions' football success, they would instead hire Skip Holtz as their head coach. While that may sound a bit dramatic, I will explain why things would have been so much different had Holtz not been named head coach. Holtz is the son of former legendary head coach Lou Holtz and had 22 years of coaching experience at the time of his hiring at the collegiate level. When Skip became interested in becoming a head football coach, his dad put together a list of potential coaches who would give him the best training. That list included Tom Osborne, Joe Paterno, and Terry Donahue, but upon hearing of Skip's interest, Florida State head coach Bobby Bowden said, "If you could be here in 2 days, I've got a job for you at Florida State." He spent 2 years as a grad assistant for Florida State before becoming the wide receivers coach for Colorado State in 1989. In 1990, he returned to Notre Dame, coaching the wide receivers, and later became the offensive coordinator under his father. Originally, Skip was not going to be the OC, but after Joe Moore declined the position, under Skip's recommendation, Lou was going to hire Mark Richt, who was the offensive coordinator at Florida State. Coach Bobby Bowden told Lou he could hire Richt as long as he could hire Skip. Coach Holtz said, "Well, if I'm just going to switch coaches, I might as well hire Skip." Skip helped Notre Dame go 48-1. Skip took his first head coaching job at Connecticut in 1993. And in 1998, UConn, after 100 years of football and 5 years with Skip Holtz as its head coach, played in its first Division I AA playoff game. The Huskies scored 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns to beat Hampton University 42-34. 2 days after the loss to eventual champion runner-ups, Georgia Southern, Skip resigned as head coach to join his father at South Carolina, finishing his UConn career going 34-23. Skip helped his father bring South Carolina back to national prominence, serving as the offense coordinator in 2004. After struggling for a few years, Skip was demoted to quarterback coach, and the following year, after his father retired, was told he was probably not going to be retained. Holtz would be hired by East Carolina as their head coach in 2005, staying with them until 2009, going 28-27, and winning back-to-back conference titles in 2008 and 2009. In January of 2010, it was announced that Skip was going to be the next head coach at USF. After a strong start going 8-5 that year, USF would go 5-7 and 3-9, and Skip was fired after the 2012 season. On December 13, 2012, Skip Holtz accepted an offer to be the next head coach for Louisiana Tech, going 64-50 and being fired after the 2021 season after a 3-9 record. When the USFL came calling, Skip jumped at the opportunity, explaining, "I just want a new challenge. I was excited about the opportunity to sit down and have the opportunity to talk with Brian Woods, to listen to all the people that are involved in this league and that are behind this league, that are committed to making this work." The more I started talking to Brian, the more and more excited I got about the USFL and what it was going to be. I was excited to have the opportunity to get myself into pro football. He would bring in experienced assistants like Broyles Award winner and LSU defensive coordinator John Chavez to serve as his defensive coordinator, and San Francisco 49ers Super Bowl winning wide receiver coach Larry Kirksey as the running backs coach. His most important hire, though, might have been Zach Potter to become the Stallions GM at 21 years old. Yes, you heard that right. The most important hire might have been a person who had just hit the legal drinking age and was going to be the general manager of a professional football team. Zach Potter grew up in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and always dreamed of playing quarterback. He wanted to be the guy the team counted on, the one who had the ball in his hands when his team needed a win. The issue was, Potter was not the biggest kid in the world, and all the other middle schoolers were much bigger than him. He attempted to try out for the middle school football team in 6th grade, standing at 5 feet tall, but his PE teacher wouldn't even allow him to, due to feeling Potter was not big enough. His dream of playing quarterback was axed before he ever got to play it down in middle school. From there, he shifted his mindset from playing the game of football to coaching the game of football, telling RJ Young back in 2023, "I kind of quickly realized that coaching is really going to favor the guys that have played it most. So I thought, well, I'm going to watch a ton of film and see if I can study these athletes and what makes them so great. I always thought that maybe I could put a team together. Maybe I could find a way to assemble a team of talent that could win something great. I'm using Twitter, I'm using Huddle, I'm using anything and everything to identify. YouTube, mainly all highlight tapes. I knew that I wanted the ability to identify talent, and I wanted the ability to identify people and characters. When he was not watching film, he was studying great players, coaches, and evaluators. He studied multiple leagues across different sports and felt like he could mold a roster like Steve Kerr did for the Golden State Warriors. It was not about finding the best guy out there, but the best group of guys that fit together and could accomplish something special. Potter left his parents' house at the age of 16 and found himself couch surfing and financially on his own. His high school principal knew this and was able to get him special dispensation to secure a financial aid package to attend Iowa Western Community College. When he arrived at Iowa Western, Potter reached out to the football coach, Coach Scott Stromier, one of the best community college football coaches in the nation. The Retrievers produced the aforementioned Zaquade White, Oklahoma's defensive tackle Perion Winfrey, and at least 2 All-Americans in each of their last 13 years, and won the 2012, 2022, and 2023 NJCAA National Championships. Potter was given the responsibility to film practice when he learned the fundamentals of professional film study, including not only how to identify great players, but great players that his coach saw as a fit. Stromier told RJ Young, "I told Scott that the biggest thing I'm going to tell you is every coach is looking for something different. So just because Iowa Western likes them doesn't mean the next coach is going to like them. So your job is to figure out what the coach likes. Watch as much film as possible with the coaches in your organization that you're at and get a feel for what they look for. I could send an O-lineman to 2 different O-line coaches. One guy could say, no, he doesn't bend good enough. The other guy could be like, I don't really care about how much he bends. He finishes his blocks. So I told Zach, you have to find what the best guy is for your coach. So I told Zach, you have to find out what your guy, your coach, is looking for. This was a lesson Potter took when it came to running the Birmingham Stallions. Potter would go on to work at the University of Nebraska in 2020, working for Matt Lubbock and Scott Frost's staff. That is where he would learn about the USFL and met USFL President Brian Woods. Holtz would hear about Potter and thought Potter was the exact GM he wanted. After a conversation that lasted over 3.5 hours, they both agreed they wanted to build a dynasty. When sifting through the player pool for the 2022 USFL draft, Potter identified one of the most decorated defensive players in the history of college football, linebacker Scooby Wright, and drafted him. He also knew that each franchise had territorial rights for colleges in and around their state, which also gave Birmingham an advantage, having both Auburn and Alabama in their territory. But anybody could sign players who finished college prior to 2019. Potter explained, "Well, knowing that all my guys are my rights no matter what, I went out and watched all the 2019 and older guys, first and foremost, with the idea of if they get cut, I'm going to call them first, because they're going to worry about so many other people. And I'm just going to worry about taking the best talent from their territory." The biggest decision for Potter and Holtz, though, was going to be who was going to be playing quarterback for the Stallions in 2022. Holtz wanted to bring in his former college quarterback, Jamar Smith, because Smith already knew his offense and Holtz knew what he had in the former Louisiana Tech quarterback. Potter explained the process, telling RJ Young, "The first thing I had to understand was exactly what quarterbacks were going to be in the pool, and second was what Coach Holtz was exactly looking for and what we believe it's going to be successful in the spring football. I remember Coach Holtz being a little frustrated with me at the time because his safety net was always Jamar Smith, who undoubtedly is still one of the best quarterbacks in our league, and a guy that can orchestrate his offense at a high level. Once it became official that Smith was going to be a Stallion, Potter wanted to find a young quarterback with a lot of potential that they could develop to serve as the backup. Potter liked dual-threat quarterback Alex Magoo, who was a 7th-round draft pick during the 2018 NFL Draft out of FIU. Holtz was a little weary at first, but Potter felt like he was the right choice and was able to convince Holtz to bring him in. a decision that would pay off massively come 2023. So Potter had found his top playmaker on defense in Scooby Wright, and his two quarterbacks Holtz could use to run his offense. He was also able to bring in guys like Victor Bolden out of Oregon State at wide receiver, CJ Marable at running back out of Coastal Carolina, and Wake Forest's Sage Surratt to play tight end. On defense, they brought in DeMarcus Gates out of Ole Miss, Tay Hayes out of App State, and JoJo Tillery out of Wofford. They also had one of the best kickers in the league in Brandon Aubrey. The Stallions would start the season off with a win over the New Jersey Generals 28-24, would proceed to win close game after close game to start the season 8-0. They would eventually fall to the Houston Gamblers 17-15, but finish the season 9-1 with a win over the Tampa Bay Bandits. The Stallions had an advantage because they got to play all their games in Birmingham, as that would be the host city and they would enter the playoffs with the best record. Potter's work was not done after the preseason though, as he continued to bolster the roster throughout the season. When Bo Scarborough became available, Potter swooped in and signed him. The Stallions would beat the New Orleans Breakers 31-17 during the division finals, and won a thriller over the Philadelphia Stars 33-30 in the inaugural USFL championship game. They were the best of the best, sitting at 11-1 at the end of the season, while Smith threw for 1,570 passing yards, 10 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, while Marable and Scarborough combined for 753 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. That offseason, they would lose Victor Bolden to the NFL and Sage Surratt to the New Orleans Breakers. They would also lose Scarborough early in the season, as well as Myron Mitchell at wide receiver. To replace Bolden and Mitchell, Potter brought in Deion Kane out of Clemson and Davion Davis out of Sam Houston State, who Potter had identified early on. To replace Scarborough, they brought in former South Carolina running back Zaquandre White and former NC State running back Ricky Pearson. When it came to replacing Surratt, the Stallions brought in Texas A&M All-American Jay Sternberger, former Arkansas tight end LaMichael Pettyway, and national championship winning tight end and son of Hall of Fame wide receiver Randy Moss, Thad Moss out of LSU. The hits to the roster did not stop there though, as Jamar Smith would get hurt in the season opener and Scooby Wright would go down with an injury in week 4. Luckily, the Stallions still had Magoo, and they replaced Wright with Ohio linebacker Quinton Poling. Potter didn't get everyone he wanted though, missing out on Isaiah Henney, who was compared to Kevontae Turpin, who instead signed with the Pittsburgh Maulers. With all the hits to the roster though, the Stallions kept on winning. They opened the season going 2-0 in dominating fashion, beating the Generals 27-10 and the Memphis Showboats 42-2, would lose to the New Orleans Breakers 45-31. They rebounded with the win over the Maulers 24-20, but fell to the Houston Gamblers 27-20 to start the season 3-2. Some wondered whether the Stallions had come back down to earth due to their consistent roster changes, but they would use that as motivation and go on 7 straight wins, beating the New Orleans Breakers and Pittsburgh Maulers in the playoffs to finish the year 10-2 and repeat as USFL champions. Throughout the season, Holtz credited Potter for helping build such a great roster, and Potter's push to bring in Magoo paid off, as he would throw for 2,105 yards, 20 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions, en route to winning the 2023 USFL MVP award, while also rushing for 403 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. Marable would rush for 524 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground, while Davis turned into the Stallions' deep threat, finishing with 575 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns, while Sternberger finished with 517 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. Following the 2023 campaign, the Stallions would watch as multiple players sign with NFL teams. Brandon Aubrey to the Dallas Cowboys, where he'd become one of the best kickers in the NFL this past season, Austin Watkins to the Eagles, Khalil Davis to the Houston Texans, Magoo to the Green Bay Packers, Davion Davis to the Washington Commanders, and Pettyway to the New England Patriots. Once again, Potter and Holtz needed to rebuild their roster, and this time they were going to have an even bigger challenge. Last fall, it was announced that the XFL and USFL were going to merge to form the UFL, so they could build a more sustainable spring league. Instead of just competing against the USFL, the Stallions were now going to compete against the best of the best when it came to spring football. Some felt like the Stallions might not be able to win another championship, as people felt the XFL may have been a stronger league. Potter and Holtz felt differently, and they began to rebuild their team. To replace Magoo, they brought in former Ole Miss quarterback and 3rd-round NFL draft pick Matt Corral, as well as former Nebraska and Kansas State quarterback Adrian Martinez. They continued to bolster their rosters by bringing in former Clemson wide receiver and 3rd-round pick Amari Rodgers, as well as former 1st-round pick and Michigan defensive end Taco Charlton. They also returned key playmakers from the 2023 campaign like CJ Marable, Ricky Pearson, Deion Kane, and Jay Sternberger. On defense, they added former St. Louis Battlehawks and 5th-round NFL draft pick Kenny Robinson and former 7th-round pick Carlos Davis out of Nebraska. Scooby Wright, JoJo Tillery, among others, also returned. During the offseason, Holtz joined the Northwestern staff as a special assistant, but returned to the Stallions for this season. Many wondered how the Stallions would compete against the likes of the XFL's DC Defenders and St. Louis Battlehawks. Their response? The Stallions were the top dogs. The Stallions would start the 2024 campaign off 8-0, beating the Arlington Renegades in the UFL's opening game, led by Matt Corral, but it would be Adrian Martinez who would take the reins of the offense most of the season. A dangerous dual-threat quarterback. They survived a close game against DC at home as well as the St. Louis Battlehawks before falling to San Antonio on the road 18-9. They responded with a 20-19 win over Michigan in the season finale to finish the regular season 9-1. In the playoffs, they would beat Michigan once again for the third time this season, 31-18, before dominating San Antonio and St. Louis this past weekend to win their third straight Spring League title, cementing them as the first outdoor football team dynasty since Edmonton of the CFL did the same in the late 70s and early 80s. Adrian Martinez would be named the league MVP after throwing for 1,748 yards, 15 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions, while also rushing for 528 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns, leading the team in both passing and rushing yards. Pearson and Marable both rushed for nearly 300 yards themselves and combined for 10 touchdowns on the ground. Kane led the team in receiving with 436 yards and 3 touchdowns, while Sternberger impressed once again with 454 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns as well. The Stallions finished the season 11-1 and will look to four-peat next season. DeAndre Tillman and Ricky Pearson have already signed with the NFL, with more expected to come in the next few weeks. Potter, who looked to get a job with the Minnesota Vikings a few years back, but told he was overqualified, and Holtz also plan to be back and will have their work cut out for them this season. Skip Holtz was angry after getting fired by Louisiana Tech after a 3-9 season in 2021, telling AL.com, "I was frustrated. It felt like we had a lot of success there as we went. 7 bowl games in a row? Won 6 of them in a row? We had a lot of success with a program that had never been to back-to-back bowl games. So when I got fired, I felt like it was unfair. Felt like it was unjust. And I had a little pity party." But that decision by Louisiana Tech would be the best thing ever, not just for Holtz, but for the Birmingham Stallion fans. Holtz plans to be around for as long as the Stallions will let him, saying, "It's been a lot of fun. I can't tell you how many times I've said it, but this is just the best job I've ever had. I say that I love these young men that we're coaching. I think they're here because they love ball. I think every one of them has a different why. USFL, XFL, now UFL has been amazing for players as well, with Kehevon Tizino telling SI, "I was driving Amazon trucks, from being nobody to somebody in a matter of years. I mean, it just tells you how quick God can just change your life in a matter of a month or two. I just say it's the league of opportunity and it's the league of development." Well, Adrian Martinez said, "I don't think anyone in this league is a finished product. I think a lot of these guys get written off, and we come here to prove them wrong. I think a lot of these guys on our football team got a chip on their shoulder coming in here. I want to prove people wrong and prove that they can continue to get better and be a player at the next level." While I did not get to watch as many Stallions or UFL games as I wanted to this season because of my full-time job, I still had a blast with the league. The Spring Leagues not only created opportunities for players and coaches, but also content creators as well. If it were not for the XFL in 2020, I don't know if this channel would even exist, to be honest. The Stallions dynasty has been so fun to watch, and to see what Skip Holtz and Zach Potter have been able to put together and accomplish has truly been amazing. The Stallions took a risk on Holtz over Gene Chizik, and Holtz took a risk on a 21-year-old Nebraska grad, and it truly paid off. The spring football leagues are truly magical, and the Stallions dynasty has officially been cemented into place. What do you think? Who wins the 2025 UFL Championship game? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out one of my other videos YouTube thinks you will love right here. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, remember to embrace the grind.